It was Thanksgiving when my father stood up from his end of the dinner table, looked down the length of it at me, and announced to 14 people that fibromyalgia wasn't real. "It's what doctors write on the form when a patient wants an excuse," he said. "Look it up." There were 16 people in that dining room. My aunt and her husband. 3 cousins, my grandmother, 79 years old, trying to enjoy her sweet potato casserole in peace. My brother's girlfriend, who had met our family exactly twice. Every single one of them went quiet in the way people go quiet when someone says something they know is wrong, but have no intention of arguing with. My mother moved the gravy boat slightly to the left. Like rearranging silverware was something that needed doing right then. My brother made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Come on, Dad," he said, in a tone that meant he agreed with every word. "I've been sick since I was 28. I'm 32 now. 4 years of waking up with the kind of pain that doesn't have a clean source. No visible wound, no dramatic diagnosis with a scan to point at, just your own nervous system running at a frequency that shouldn't exist. I've learned to describe fibromyalgia to people who've never heard the word. I've learned to watch their faces when I do, and to know, within 30 seconds, which ones are going to believe me. My father had never been one of them. I'd known that before Thanksgiving. What I didn't know was that he had been waiting for an audience. Before I tell you what I did next, I have to tell you what nobody in that dining room knew, because that part is the whole point. I need to tell you about the $2,700. That's roughly what had been leaving my checking account every month for 3 years. Quietly. Automatically. Not in a way that announced itself as a sacrifice. That's just the kind of steady financial drain that happens when you're the person who handles things without being asked, and nobody asks because they've stopped thinking about who pays for things. I'll break it down the way I finally let myself alone on a Sunday night 6 months before that Thanksgiving, when I sat down and added it all up. My parents' supplemental health insurance, $380 a month. My dad has type 2 diabetes and early kidney complications. His plan through his old union covered the basics, but not the specialists, not the podiatrist every 8 weeks, not the ophthalmologist twice a year, not the medication copays that added up faster than I want to say out loud. When the premium increased 3 years ago and my mother mentioned it in passing, "We might have to drop the Medigap coverage. It's just gotten to be too much." I called the insurance company that same week and put my card on the monthly draw. I told my parents I had sorted it out. They didn't ask how. My brother's apartment lease. I co-signed it in the spring of 2021. He was 24, his credit score was 568, and he had been living in my parents' spare bedroom for 7 months. The complex on the east side of Scottsdale required a cosigner or 3 months up front. I have good credit. I built it carefully, the way you build it when you grow up in a house where money was always the thing nobody talked about, and you decide early on it won't be your ceiling. He asked me as a favor. "Just until I get my score up," he said. 3 years later, his score was 571 and he'd replaced his TV twice. Being on that lease meant that if he stopped paying, the debt would land on my credit report. I knew that when I signed. My dad's pharmacy account. I was the authorized secondary contact on his medication management file. In practice, that meant when a refill needed prior authorization, they called me. When his metformin dosage changed, they called me. When the pharmacy overhauled their system in 2022 and every patient had to re-verify their insurance, they called me. I called the insurance company. I called the doctor's office. I called the pharmacy back. I did it from my desk at work. During lunch breaks, I mostly spent this way. And there was the scheduling. That's the invisible part. The part nobody thinks about until it stops running. My dad had a standing endocrinology appointment every 3 months, a foot care appointment every 8 weeks, monthly labs. Someone maintained that calendar. Someone called to reschedule when a conflict came up, made sure the rescheduled date landed inside the refill window, tracked which labs the insurance needed before they'd authorize the next cycle of medication. That someone had a name. Her name was me. It had always been me. Here's the part I've had the hardest time saying. I wasn't doing any of it because anyone asked me to. They never asked. They didn't ask because they'd never acknowledged it was happening. To ask would have been to admit the system existed. Admitting the system existed would have meant admitting whose hands were running it. My brother had a habit of telling people he kept a close eye on things at home. I heard it secondhand at Christmas, at his girlfriend's birthday dinner. A vague, confident description of a caregiving role he had never actually performed. I watched him once tell a cousin, "Yeah, I handle a lot of the family stuff," and then spend the rest of dinner on his phone. The cousin nodded like it made perfect sense. My brother is tall and sounds certain when he talks, and certainty reads as competence if no one's checking underneath it. I had learned, in the years I spent doing the actual work, that the people doing it are almost never the ones who get to look like they are. I noticed something in the fall, 2 months before Thanksgiving, that I hadn't let myself look at squarely before. When my dad's labs came back with numbers that concerned his doctor, my number was in the chart. When the home delivery pharmacy sent alerts about shipping delays, the texts came to my phone. When there was a billing dispute with the insurance company over a denied specialist claim, the kind of thing that takes 4 calls across 3 weeks to resolve. I spent my Thursday lunch breaks on hold until it closed in his favor. Every safety net in my father's medical life had my name at the bottom of it. And my father thought I was faking a chronic illness for attention. He thought it loudly, and apparently had been building towards saying it in front of people, and Thanksgiving was when he got there. I want to tell you exactly how the dinner went before I tell you what I did. The detail is the point. We were maybe 20 minutes into the meal. Turkey had been on the table for about half an hour. My grandmother was on her second roll. I had just asked my cousin to pass the cranberry sauce, a completely ordinary request, made across a completely ordinary table, when my father set down his fork and delivered a verdict that had nothing to do with cranberry sauce or any conversation that had led up to it. Fibromyalgia isn't a real disease. He paused to let it sit. 16 years I worked construction on a bad shoulder, he said. Never missed a day. You know what I didn't do? Name my condition a syndrome and ask everyone to adjust. My cousin handed me the cranberry sauce very carefully, the way you hand someone something when you can't look at them. You are a healthy young woman, my dad said, and this family has been tiptoeing around a story you're telling, and I think you know it. My mother looked at the gravy boat. My brother made a sound. I don't know if his come on was directed at our father or at me. I don't think it mattered. The table had already made its decision, which was to do nothing. My aunt studied her plate. My uncle found something interesting about the far wall. My grandmother reached for her water glass with the look of a woman who had watched versions of this before and was out of energy to stop them. I want to be honest about what was happening in my body in that moment. Fibromyalgia, on a bad day, makes the inside of your skin feel like it has been tuned to a frequency that doesn't belong to it. Thanksgiving had been a medium to bad day. The drive from Tempe to Scottsdale had cost me. Carrying the casserole in from the car had cost me. Sitting in a dining chair without lumbar support for 45 minutes had been running up a tab I'd pay later, alone, in my own apartment. I was managing it the way I always manage it in public, by making sure no one could see it, which requires a specific kind of effort that people who've never done it wouldn't know to look for. My father looked at me like he was waiting for a performance. I didn't give him one. I picked up my phone from beside my plate. I kept it there on bad days in case the pharmacy called, and I opened 2 apps. The first was my bank's bill pay portal. The second was the tenant services app for my brother's apartment complex, which I had downloaded the year before to upload his lease renewal documents. I had never deleted it. In the bill pay portal, I scheduled the cancellation of my parents' supplemental insurance auto payment, effective the current billing cycle. The next draft date was 11 days out, enough time to process. In the tenant app, I sent a message to the leasing office requesting formal removal as co-signer on my brother's lease, noting I would provide any required documentation. I put the phone face down next to my untouched plate. My father was still watching me. He had the expression of a man who thought I was sending an emotional text or photographing the moment for social media. My brother's smirk was still there, small and satisfied. "Who are you texting?" my brother said. I picked up my fork. "No one," I said. I ate 2 more bites. Then I said goodbye to my grandmother, to her specifically and no one else, and I got up and I left. The drive from Scottsdale back to my apartment in Tempe is 22 minutes on a light traffic night. That night it was closer to 30. I sat in the left lane on the 101, and I felt something I hadn't predicted, which was a very specific absence of weight, not happiness, not satisfaction. Just lighter. The way a room feels when you've stopped holding your breath and didn't realize you were holding it. My phone went before I hit my exit. My mother's first message: "I don't appreciate you leaving like that. Your father was just trying to have an honest conversation." My brother's first message: "Real mature, Stella." My name, used as a punctuation mark for contempt. I read them both in my parking lot, and then I put the phone in my bag and I went upstairs, and I took the medication I'd been delaying since noon, and I lay down on my couch and I let my body stop performing. Here is what happened over the next 2 weeks. The Monday after Thanksgiving, the leasing office called my brother. I know this because he texted me at 11:14 a.m. "What did you do?" No punctuation, just those 4 words. The leasing office had informed him that his co-signer had initiated removal from his lease, and that given his credit profile, he would need either a new qualified co-signer or an additional 2 months security deposit within 30 days. He didn't have 2 months deposit. We both knew that. He called 3 times before noon. I let it go to voicemail. On the second Wednesday of December, my mother called about the insurance. "There's a letter," she said. Her voice had something in it I hadn't heard before, a quality that was almost, not quite, but almost, uncertain. "It says the automatic payment didn't process. The supplemental plan will be suspended if we don't pay by the 15th. "I know," I said. "I canceled it." Silence. "I've been paying it for 3 years," I said. "Since you mentioned dropping the plan at Christmas of 2021, I put my card on file and paid it every month." Another silence, longer. "You never said anything," she said. "No," I said, "I didn't." She didn't say thank you. I hadn't expected her to. What she said was, "Why are you doing this now?" I thought about how to answer. I thought about 16 people at a table. My cousin handing me the cranberry sauce like it was made of something fragile. My father's voice climbing the way it does when he's performing and knows he has an audience. Because he said it out loud this time, I said, in front of everyone, "And you moved the gravy boat." She didn't respond to that. What happened with my dad's medical care took about 3 weeks to fully come apart, and it went like this. The pharmacy's system tried to reach the secondary contact on file about a prior authorization that had lapsed on his monthly labs order. The secondary contact was me. I didn't respond. The authorization expired. The lab order didn't process. His endocrinologist's office, waiting on results that weren't coming, called the number in the chart. That number was also me. I didn't respond. By mid-December, My mother was on the phone with a billing coordinator, trying to understand a system she had never once had to think about. She didn't know the insurance portal login. She didn't know what prior authorization meant or why it kept coming up. She didn't know there were different numbers for different things. She didn't know because for 3 years she'd never needed to. I was the number. I was all the numbers. My brother sent my father a text, forwarded to me later by my cousin, apologetically, asking if Dad could get Stella to send over the lab account number. The devoted son who had told people for years that he handled things at home did not know the name of our father's lab provider. He did not know a single one of his medications. He had zero working knowledge of any systems keeping our father healthy, because that knowledge had always lived in my phone and my head, and nowhere else. It took me a long time to understand the real shape of what my father had done and why. I want to say it once clearly, because it changed how I held the whole thing. My father does not like needing things. I grew up watching this, the man who drove on a bad tire rather than admit it was bad. Who waited 8 months on a tooth before he'd let anyone look at it. He has spent his life in a negotiation between his body and his pride, and mostly his pride has been winning. When I got sick, that negotiation got complicated. Because here was his daughter, his younger child, the one who had always been fine, and she wasn't fine. And she needed things. And it was happening at the same time his kidneys were doing what they were doing, and his blood sugar kept drifting, and his body was quietly requiring maintenance, instead of just working. There was only room in my family for one person who needed things. My father had already claimed that position. So, he did what he does when a truth becomes too costly. He decided the truth wasn't true. He decided I was performing, and once he decided it, he could need things from me without feeling like he was taking from someone who was also struggling. If I was fine, his needs didn't cost anything. I had been paying the actual cost for 3 years, and in order for him to keep not seeing it, he had to keep insisting I wasn't real. I don't tell that part to let him go. What he said at that table I will carry for a long time. I tell it because I spent months being angry in a direction that turned out to be only part of the picture. The full picture is darker and sadder and more human than my father is a cruel man. He is a frightened one. Those are different problems. You handle them differently. I set up professional care management for him, an actual patient advocacy service that some hospital networks in the Phoenix area use for complex diabetic patients who need appointment coordination and insurance navigation. It costs money. It appears on a statement that goes to my parents now, instead of vanishing into my autopay. I made sure the transition was clean. I made sure he didn't fall through a gap during the switchover. I am my father's daughter, and I was not going to let him miss a dialysis appointment to prove a point, even if the point was one that needed proving. My brother found a cosigner, someone, I don't know who. We don't talk much now. I don't wish him anything bad. I just stopped being the floor he stood on to look tall. My mother called me in January, and it was different from the December calls. The anger phase had already run its course over text, mostly about how I'd handled things, about timing, about how this wasn't the way we dealt with problems in this family. This call was quieter. I didn't understand how much of it was you, she said. I know you didn't, I said. I should have, she said. Yes, I said. That's where we are. It isn't forgiven yet. It isn't forgotten. It's honest, which is something it wasn't before, and I'll take that as a place to start. I have a good mattress now, which sounds like a small thing until you've spent years sleeping on something your body couldn't recover on. I have a parking spot close to my door. I have a calendar that belongs only to me, my doctor appointments, my labs, my follow-ups with my own specialist. I spent 4 years managing someone else's health from inside a body that required its own management, and I cannot explain what it feels like to look at a week and see only your own name written in it. I have friends from work who know me as a person and not as a solution. One of them, when I told her the full story over coffee in February, looked at me across the table and said, "How did you do all of that without saying anything?" I thought about it. Because saying it would have meant asking for something, I said. And I had learned that asking made me difficult, so I just kept doing. She put her hand near mine on the table. That was enough. My dad and I talked once, in March. I drove out on a Tuesday afternoon. He was in the living room in the recliner he's had for 12 years, shaped like him now. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving. He looked like a man who had set something down and wasn't sure where. He didn't try to unsay what he'd said at the table. My father doesn't walk sentences back. What he said instead, looking somewhere to the left of my face, was, "I know you weren't pretending." Just that. Not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," just the admission, which from him I've come to understand is the same thing. We watched the end of an old Western the way we used to when I was a kid, and the theme music meant it was that kind of movie, and I'd run in from outside to sit beside his chair. It wasn't what it used to be. It was something quieter and more careful and probably more true, and I think it might be the beginning of something that can last, because it isn't built on a story anymore. I drove home in the late afternoon with the windows down. Arizona, in March, smells like something is about to happen. I had the radio on low and no one needed anything from me, and I thought, this is what it was supposed to feel like all along. They told me my illness wasn't real. They had no idea what was real until I stopped holding it up. I know what I carried for 3 years. I know what it cost. I set it down with my own hands on my own terms, and I drove away, and I have not gone back to pick it up.